Hello, so today I thought I'd show you how I did this journal page. One of the ladies that saw it on Facebook wanted either a process video or a video to sort of see how I did it. It's quite a long time ago, it's a year and a bit ago, but I think I can remember the process more or less. Rather than do another journal page, because I've already got this journal page completed, I'm going to do it on my favourite size at the moment, which is a postcard size. Because then it can be part of my 100-day project. So I've got this piece of cardboard. It's part of a fairy soap powder box, but it's quite sturdy. It's not really thick, but it's got a bit of weight to it. The printing on this side was quite shiny, so I just sand it back with a sanding block. Once I've sanded it back, just make sure you get all the dust off your workstation and the dust off the card, because the paint that it brings off creates the dust. I'm going to work on this side because basically it will disappear because I'll be covering it up. But the colours that are left, if there's a little bit of lemon or a bit of blue showing through, that doesn't matter, that's just added interest, which means that the back will be this just craft card. So if I want to cover it with white and put a postcard, printed postcard stamp here, I can do. And there's no sort of pattern to show through that side. I've got this pot, which is PVA glue mixed with a small amount of water, so that it makes it a little bit runnier and a little bit more like decoupage glue. You could use, I've just run out of decoupage glue upstairs in my craft room. You could use decoupage glue, or you can use matte medium. I quite like matte medium. I prefer decoupage glue, but as I say, it's downstairs at the moment, so I'll use what I've got up here. So this is PVA glue, as I say, with water added. I've got quite a big paintbrush, and I've got this box of scraps of paper. They're all sort of the colours that would be in leaves. There's book pages, bits of old invoice, some Tim Holtz tissue, decoupage tissue paper, some deli paper that's had jelly printing put onto it and rolled off onto it. That's with acrylic paint. There are some little bits of distress oxide onto paper. You've got to be careful if you use water reactive things like this paper with water reactive oxides on it, because the glue rehydrates it and makes it move. But also when you do the final layer of the gesso on the top, if you've got a lot of this and it hasn't got the glue on the top, it'll move and mix with your gesso. I don't mind that so much. I'm quite sort of serendipity, whatever happens, happens, happy accidents and all that. So, but just be aware that the oxides or distress inks will move. I've also got some little bits of jelly print roll-off papers, which are a bit darker. You could use printed paper, really whatever you've got and you want to use up from your scrap box. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm doing this on my glass mat so that it doesn't matter if my glue goes on there, it'll just wipe off later. So I'll start with some book pages, and I'm going to put a reasonable amount of glue on. And I don't particularly bother about being straight on the edges. because I can cut them off later. I can cut them straight later. So I just want sort of overlapping bits of different colours and patterns and everything. You want a very random looking block of paper. Now that one I might as well put on the edge because it's got an edge, because I don't really want any straight edges in here at all. You can start at one side and work your way across, or you can be very, very random. I'm sort of working my way across but being random at the same time. To save you watching me glue paper down for hours on end, I may speed this video up. So I won't talk anymore, and then I can just speed it up if I want. Right, there we are. I've got the majority of my postcard covered. You'll see that I've covered some pieces more than once. I've sort of overlapped and collaged one layer on top of another. But in places you can see the text through the jet deli paper and sort of the text through the Tim Holtz paper, so it's layers upon layers. I'm going to dry that now, and then I'll trim the edges, and then after that I'm going to add some acrylic paint. I'll just make sure, let's just wipe my glass mat and then I don't get too much glue on the back. Yeah, I think it's all covered. I'll quickly dry it and then we'll come back and add a little bit of acrylic paint. just about dry. I'll just snip off the excess. I've got a little bit on the back. It doesn't really matter. I usually cover the backs of my postcards. You could do this for greetings cards as well, and just cut your first square that you will be putting on your card. Probably slightly smaller than your card blank, because then you could mat and layer. It's still a little tacky, but I can trim it off better later. I just basically need to know where my paper ends, so that when I do my drawing of my leaf on it, it doesn't completely go off the page. Right, so that looks a little neater. Better just put the lid on my glue. Now, if you wanted to use something like distress inks, what you can do is you can apply it mixed with matte medium or gel medium, which I think actually, no, I think I'll just do it with acrylic paints. It'll dry quicker. And I've got a couple of colours of green. I'm just going to put them on a little bit on my mat. A bit too much, but never mind. And then I just dab a little bit on at a time, just to amalgamate the layers, make it a bit more cohesive. I do it quite thinly, because then you can still see the text or whatever through. I don't want to completely cover the layers up. That's why I put a little bit on my finger and then dab it off on my craft mat, because really it only needs to be a little bit just to make it a bit more cohesive. And I'm just putting the two colours so that there's some in each part of the postcard. I'm going quite a bit on the edges because it gives a little bit of a frame. If you go down the edges a little bit, it darkens the edges and frames your composition. But because we've got the texture of the layered papers in here, it picks up paint in random areas. And if you wanted to go really, really pale, you could put a bit of gesso as well. But I think that's maybe a little bit more over there. We're nearly there. And if you put a bit too much on with one finger, or like that, rub it off with a dry finger. Just want a little bit of that brighter green at that side. And you've got a little bit more control using your fingers than you have with a paintbrush or a spatula or anything like that. You can, if you want, if you're not comfortable using your fingers. I'll just get another piece of card to show you. If you've got a brayer, you can brayer your paint on. So you get some on your brayer and just randomly go over your postcard. Imagine that's covered in paper. So you get random sort of marks. Like that. I don't like wasting paint, so I'm going to pick this paint up here so that it isn't wasted. And that'll be the start of another background. So So I'll just get rid of that. I do use baby wipes as well as washable cloths, but if I use the baby wipes I keep them and dry them because I make twine out of them and use them in collaging and things. So there we are, that's our base layer. So now I want just a little bit of something else on the top for another layer before I do my drawing onto it. This is one of my favourite indigo blue stamps, so I'm going to use that. And I'm using green ink, green archival ink, because I just think it will add to the whole look of the composition. And it doesn't have to be perfect stamping, and I'm using archival because once it's dry it's waterproof, so the gesso won't move it, it will stop. There we are. And this could be any stamp that you want. Could be a line, could be smaller text, and you can mix and match your stamps and use any you want really. I might do a little bit in black as well, again archival. The more interest you have in your base layer the better it is, because some of this will show through even though you're going to cover quite a lot of it with gesso. It will show through. Right, so that dries fairly quickly. I think everything else is dry. We'll just give it a quick blast. Yeah, I like that. Just have to decide which way up I want it now. I think we'll have it this way up. That is just a little dark, so I might just add a tiny little bit of gesso there. And you can just add a little bit of gesso randomly in other places, just with your finger, just to lighten it up. Squeeze a little bit out onto my glass mat. And as you've done before, you just take majority off your, it's a bit like dry brushing but with your fingers. And as I say, you could use a paintbrush if you wanted. I'm just lightening areas that I think might be a bit dark once I start sort of doing my drawing and everything. That's it, that's a little bit better. That's just lightened that area up there. Quick dry again, just to make sure. Yeah. So that's our base. Now, let's see. I like a fairly soft pencil for drawing. I'm going to possibly draw this out. I think I'll do it with a pencil first and then do it with the gesso and then pen over the top or stabilo all. But basically you're just going to, I think I need a softer one. Yeah, my 4B, I love my 4B. I'm going to draw freehand my leaf, my spray of leaves. So that's the stem, and then we'll have a leaf there, a leaf there, one there and one there, and we'll just freehand draw the leaves onto the stem. I need another one there. Yeah, I think that'll do. Do we need another there? Yeah, we will. I'll put another one there. Right, so it doesn't have to be perfect because you are going to go over this. So I'm now going to fill in all around the leaves. As I say, I'm going to fill in all of this with gesso, with a paintbrush. I'll probably need a couple of different sizes so that I can get into the small places, but leaving the leaf shapes free. So I find it easiest to just go around the leaves to set off with. This is why I have a couple of different sizes of brush, because sometimes you need quite a fine brush to go in between. Now this is the bit where if you'd used papers with distress oxides or distress inks on them, if you hadn't sealed them in with your PVA glue or matte medium, the inks would start to move. So it is something to bear in mind when you're choosing your papers to use. It will look fairly messy at this stage. There, I'll go into the corner, I might as well. Because gesso is not completely solid when you paint with it, you can actually see the background papers still through. So I'll probably speed the video up so that you don't have to watch me painting around each individual leaf. I'm now just dabbing gesso on randomly, just to break up any brush lines, because as you go round the leaves you do tend to get sort of lines where you've made sure you're going round the outside line of the leaf, but then you can soften those by just getting a little bit of gesso on your brush and just dabbing round randomly, and it gets rid of the brush lines, which are any harsh ones. And if there's any little bits where you think you need a bit more gesso. And it looks very unfinished at the moment, but when I add the next layer, when this is dry, it will finish it off. So I'll just quickly dry that again. I think that's all dry. Yep. Now we can now go in with a water soluble pencil or a fine liner which isn't waterproof. It's entirely up to you. I'm going to use a Stabilo All. It'll go onto all surfaces, but it is water reactive. You could use a Posca pen. You can use, these are fine liners, but they aren't waterproof. You've got to make sure that your gesso is completely dry before you use these, else you will ruin your pencil, your pen. But you can sort of go in and make it more definite and darker with these. Let's do the stem like that. Do this and then I will show you how to use the Stabilo All as well. So I'm just following the lines of my leaf. This is the veins of the leaf that I'm following. And it doesn't matter how sketchy you are, because that's the general idea. And then round the outside of the leaf. Now I'm going to do that with this fine liner pen, which is not waterproof, but then on the top I'm going to do Stabilo All. You would do one or the other. You don't need to do both. Depends what you've got. And if you haven't got either of those, you can use a black fine Posca pen, and while it's still wet, apply the water. So I'm just outlining all the leaves, not being precise, but just more or less where the edges of the leaves are and the veins of the leaf. I will also do it with a Stabilo All because I like this effect. So we go down the middle vein again. Then round the outside of the leaves. And again, it doesn't matter if you're not perfect. One last one. Right, so there we are. So I'll now get my water brush, which I seem to have momentarily lost. There we are. Just make sure there's some water. You can just do this with a paintbrush if you haven't got a water brush. I find a water brush just is a little bit more controllable. And you're basically just going to go where your stabilo awl or your fine liner is. Just round the edges, and it makes it move. And it gives it quite a sort of painterly look, really. A little bit more abstract, less defined. And it is completely random. You'll get some bits that'll flow, some that don't flow at all, some that run away like crazy. I must admit, a bigger sized project looks better, but this is fine just for showing you the technique. Gone through all the veins, and I just turn it round so because it's easier than trying to go across what I've already done. There we are. Now it's completely random what effect you'll get depending on your base papers, the colours you add. Anything like that does make quite a difference. So this one is different to the initial journal page, if I just find it. Oh yeah. That one, because it's a lot bigger scale, and this was a very, very light layer of gesso. And there was quite a lot stronger colours in the background. So it does completely make a difference. But then also, once this is dry, you can go back in. That isn't quite dry. The thing with these is you can actually take a bit of the colour off. If there's too much colour, you can move it off. Or add a bit more gesso to dull it down a bit more. But basically, when it's completely dry, you can then outline your leaves a little bit more definite and give it a little bit more definition. As much as I said you didn't want your outlines to be definite, you then add some definition in to make it less fluffy, if you know what I mean. You really should wait while everything's dry. So you can just go on the outside of your stabilo awl marks. And then it makes it look a lot better again. I'll have to wait while this is dried a bit more, I think. There we are. So that is the general technique. As I say, it looks a lot better on a bigger page, but it still looks quite nice as a postcard like that. I am going to darken the edges of my postcard because it's very white, and I just think a little bit of green just around the edge will just pick up the green in the leaves, because we've used this colour for stamping. and that just gives it a little bit of a frame. If you wanted to, you could also, this is one of my makeshift stencils, do a little bit of stenciling as well to break up the background. So there we are. What I think I might do with that one is when it's completely dry, add a little bit of white as well, because I think it just needs a bit of something else. So just a little bit of white on the inside would just maybe work. You just keep adding layers till you're happy with the finished result. Be as sketchy as you can, because it makes it look a lot better if it's sketchy. And down all the leaves, all the veins. Yeah. So that's our postcard done. It looks, as I say, completely different to this one, but you can see there are some similarities. You can see the background papers here. You can see a little bit in the background here. This might have been a different make of gesso even, or I could have watered it down a little bit. But the technique is more or less the same.